Clearwater Springs, Florida, a town where sunshine drizzles through the citrus groves and the air hums with the buzz of cicadas. This wasn't a place known for its wild drama, its brushes with the primal edge of nature. Until Julia Banks, a woman whose heart beat in rhythm with the wild, decided to make it so. Julia wasn't just an animal lover, she was an animal magnet. From the time she could crawl, she was surrounded by critters, stray kittens rescued from storm drains, injured. Birds nursed back to health in shoeboxes. Even the occasional lost turtle she'd coax across busy roads. For Julia, every creature was a life worth saving, a story worth cherishing. Her passion bloomed into a purpose. She dedicated her life to animal rehabilitation, transforming her home into a haven for the injured and abandoned. Raccoons with broken limbs, opossums orphaned to young. Even the occasional wayward bobcat, Julia's door was always open, her heart always ready. But among the countless creatures that passed through her sanctuary, one stood out. One that would forever change her life, a baby alligator she named Reef. Julia found him on the banks of the nearby Apalachicola River, a tiny, vulnerable hatchling, barely 8 inches long. Most would have seen a fearsome predator in miniature, a creature to be feared and avoided. Julia saw only helplessness. He was lost, alone, his mother likely gone. His scales were a soft, almost velvety green, patterned with dark stripes, and his eyes, large and round, seemed to plead for help. It was an impulse, a moment of pure, unadulterated compassion. She scooped him up, cradling him gently in a towel, and brought him home. That single act, driven by love and a touch of naivete, would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately end in tragedy. The bond between Julia and Reef was immediate, almost uncanny. Friends would later recall how she'd dote on him, speaking to him in soft, reassuring tones. She swore he recognized her voice, that he'd nuzzle against her hand when she stroked his tiny head. She joked that he'd imprinted on her, that he saw her as his mother. And in those early days, perhaps he did. Legally, owning an alligator in Florida is complicated. Recognizing the need to do things the right way, Julia, leveraging her existing animal rehabilitation license, navigated the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC. It wasn't easy. She faced skepticism, mountains of paperwork, and rigorous inspections. But Julia was persistent. She argued her case, emphasizing her experience with wildlife, her commitment to Reef's well-being, and her dedication to providing him with a suitable habitat. Eventually, she secured a special permit, a legal allowance, to keep and care for Reef, even as he outgrew his initial tiny form. The permit came with strict stipulations, regular inspections, detailed reports on Reef's health and growth, and a commitment to maintaining a secure and appropriate enclosure. Julia promised to abide by every regulation, convinced that she could provide Reef with a safe and fulfilling life. And for a while, she did. Reef thrived under Julia's care. He lived initially in a large, custom-built indoor enclosure, complete with a heated pond and basking rocks. Julia meticulously prepared his meals, grinding turkey meat and supplementing it with essential vitamins. She hand-fed him, gently tapping a spoon against the enclosure wall to signal feeding time. She treated him like a child, nurturing him, showering him with attention. But alligators grow. They grow fast, and Reef was no exception. By the time he was 3 years old, he had already surpassed 5 feet in length. His once soft scales had hardened, his jaws had grown powerful, and his eyes, once wide with innocence, now held a glint of something else, something wilder. This rapid growth didn't go unnoticed. Wildlife officers, seasoned veterans of Florida's unique landscape, began to express concerns. They visited Julia's property regularly, conducting inspections and offering advice. Their message was consistent, unwavering. Alligators, no matter how long they've been raised by humans, never truly lose their instincts. They are apex predators, hardwired for survival, driven by primal urges that can override any semblance of domestication. They warned Julia about the dangers of anthropomorphism, the tendency to project human emotions and motivations onto animals. They explained that Reef's seemingly affectionate behaviors, his calm demeanor, his responsiveness to her voice, were likely the result of conditioning, not genuine affection. Food, territory, scent, these were the drivers of Reef's behavior, not love or trust. "He's not a pet, Julia," one officer cautioned during a particularly tense inspection. "He's a wild animal, a very powerful wild animal, and one day his instincts are going to kick in." But Julia wouldn't hear it. To her, Reef wasn't just another alligator. He was different. He was special. He was family. She dismissed the warnings, clinging to her belief that her bond with Reef was unbreakable, that her love could conquer nature itself. She saw the photos she posted online, Reef resting his head on her lap, and it reinforced her false idea of safety as Reef continued to grow. Julia made a fateful decision. She transitioned him to an outdoor enclosure, a converted in-ground swimming pool in her backyard. It was a spacious habitat, offering him plenty of room to swim and bask in the sun. But it also brought him closer to the human world, blurring the lines between domesticity and the wild. Julia swam with Reef regularly, convinced that this shared activity fostered trust and deepened their bond. She'd float serenely beside him, talking to him in a soothing voice, even stroking his massive jaw. He'd respond by closing his eyes, remaining perfectly still, as if comforted by her presence. Neighbors watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. Some admired Julia's courage, her unwavering commitment to her unusual pet. Others whispered about the inherent dangers, the ticking time bomb lurking in her backyard. They could feel something wasn't right, but they couldn't put their finger on it. They only knew it was bad. The pool was a constant source of discussion and argument in the neighborhood. How could she do that? She's going to get herself killed. What if it gets out? All reasonable thoughts and fears, but none that Julia cared to give any merit. Julia brushed off their concerns, posting videos on social media, showcasing her idyllic life with Reeve. She wanted to show the world that alligators weren't monsters, that they were capable of connection, of companionship. Her followers were captivated, some amazed, others deeply disturbed. The warnings grew, louder, more insistent. Wildlife officials reiterated their concerns, pointing to Reef's increasing size, his changing behavior, and the inherent risks of keeping a predator in a residential setting. Incidents began to occur, subtle at first, but increasingly alarming. Loud hissing during feeding times, the thunderous crack of his tail against the fence, the chilling sight of him lunging toward the enclosure when a neighbor walked by with a dog, yet Julia remained blind to the danger. She clung to the illusion that Reef was still the vulnerable hatchling she had rescued from the river, refusing to acknowledge the powerful, predatory force he had become. She was ignoring all the signs, just like many do when blinded by misguided love, as Reef transitioned from adorable hatchling to formidable reptile. Subtle yet significant changes began to manifest, changes that screamed danger to seasoned eyes, but were tragically downplayed by Julia. Initially, his playful nips became more forceful. His youthful curiosity morphed into a calculating gaze. The once innocent chirps and squeaks evolved into guttural hisses, especially during feeding times, a clear signal of territorial possessiveness. The size, of course, was the most obvious transformation. Each passing month saw Reef expand, his body thickening, his tail growing ever more powerful. What started as a manageable aquatic pet soon ballooned into a semi-aquatic behemoth, dwarfing the pool he now called home. By the time he reached 7 feet, neighbors began to express serious concern, their initial fascination giving way to apprehension. One neighbor, a retired construction worker named Frank Miller, recalled witnessing Reef's raw power firsthand. "I was working on my fence one afternoon," Frank later stated in an interview, "and Julia was feeding Reef. She tossed him a whole chicken and that gator. He just reared up, slammed his tail against that chain link like a battering ram. The whole fence shook, scared the living daylights out of me." These anecdotes, however, did little to sway Julia's unwavering belief in her special connection with Reef. She saw not aggression, but excitement. Not territoriality, but playful energy. Her social media feeds painted a rosy picture of domestic tranquility, filled with images of her swimming alongside Reef, stroking his snout, even allowing him to rest his head on her lap. Wildlife experts, naturally, viewed these interactions with growing alarm. Kenneth Lyles, a veteran field officer with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, paid several visits to Julia's property, each time growing more concerned. Lyles, a man hardened by years of encountering dangerous wildlife, tried to reason with Julia, to impress upon her the inherent risks of keeping such a powerful predator in a residential setting. "Julia," Lyles stated in his official report, "I understand you care for this animal, but you have to understand, he's not a dog. He's an alligator. His instincts are hardwired. They're not going to just disappear because you feed him and swim with him." But Julia remained steadfast, even defiant. She countered Lyles's warnings with anecdotes of Reef's gentleness, his responsiveness to her voice, his apparent affection. She insisted that Reef was different, that he understood her, that he would never intentionally harm her. "He knows me, Mr. Lyles," Julia would say, her voice tinged with a mixture of pride and exasperation. "He recognizes my scent, my voice. We have a bond. You can't possibly understand." Lyles, however, was unmoved. He had seen this scenario play out too many times. Well-meaning individuals, blinded by affection, tragically underestimating the unpredictable nature of wild animals. He issued a formal warning, documenting his concerns in detail, but ultimately lacked the legal authority to remove Reef from Julia's care, without concrete evidence of aggressive behavior. And for a time, Reef remained calm. He continued to coexist peacefully with Julia, lulling her into a false sense of security. But the underlying tension was palpable, the potential for disaster simmering just beneath the surface. Small incidents began to pile up, each one a subtle crack in the facade of domestic harmony. A neighbor's small dog, venturing too close to the fence, was met with a sudden, explosive lunge from Reef, jaws snapping inches from its snout. A maintenance worker, tasked with repairing the pool pump, reported feeling a primal dread while working near the water, sensing Reef's watchful eyes following his every move. Perhaps most disturbingly, Julia herself began to experience fleeting moments of unease, glimpses of the wildness that lay dormant within Rafe. She noticed a change in his eyes, a cold, reptilian focus that sent a shiver down her spine. She felt the immense power of his body as she brushed against him in the pool, a raw, untamed force that she couldn't fully comprehend. Yet, even these unsettling experiences failed to shake her conviction. She dismissed them as fleeting anxieties, attributing them to stress or fatigue. She doubled down on her public image of harmony with Wreath, posting increasingly elaborate videos and photos on social media, determined to prove her critics wrong. In one particularly ill-advised video, Julia addressed her online followers directly, her voice strained with a defensive edge. "I know there are people out there who think I'm crazy, that I'm putting myself in danger," she said, her eyes darting nervously around the pool. "But Reef is not dangerous. He's misunderstood. He just needs love and trust. And I know, in my heart, that he would never hurt me." The comment section beneath the video erupted in a flurry of warnings and pleas. People begged her to be careful, to reconsider her relationship with Reef, to acknowledge the inherent risks. Some were gentle, offering heartfelt advice. Others were blunt, even accusatory, labeling her reckless and irresponsible. Julia, however, ignored the warnings. She closed herself off from the outside world, retreating further into her bubble of denial. She clung to her belief in Reef's inherent goodness, convinced that their bond was unbreakable, that love could conquer all. But nature, as it always does, had other plans. The subtle signs, the disregarded warnings, the escalating incidents, they were all precursors to the unthinkable horror that was about to unfold. The illusion of control, the fragile peace, was about to shatter in a violent, devastating display of raw, untamed power. The stage was set for the horrifying last swim of Julia Banks, and Reef, the pet alligator she so dearly loved, was about to become her executioner. The 911 call crackled with panic, a recording that would haunt the small town of Clearwater Springs for years to come. Ringtone 911, what's your emergency? A woman's voice, ragged and breathless, filled with unimaginable fear. Help, please, help. My neighbor, she's being attacked by an alligator in her pool. Okay, ma'am, stay calm. Where is this happening? It's Julia Banks' house, on Willow Creek Lane. Please, hurry, I think it's Reef. Is she still in the water? Is she conscious? A pause filled only with the horrifying sounds of thrashing and desperate cries echoing in the background. I don't know. She's screaming, but then she goes underwater. Oh God, please hurry. That desperate plea, the sheer terror in Clara Monroe's voice, painted a grim picture of the unfolding horror. The unthinkable was happening. Julia Banks, the woman who dedicated her life to rescuing animals, was now fighting for her life against the very creature she had raised, nurtured, and loved. The first responders arrived in a flurry of sirens and flashing lights, paramedics and wildlife officers racing towards the scene of the nightmare. What they found was a scene of unimaginable chaos. The once pristine backyard pool had become a churning cauldron of blood and desperation. Reef, the massive alligator, was a whirlwind of raw power, his jaws clamped firmly onto Julia's leg, his body contorting in a terrifying death roll. The water, once clear and inviting, was now stained crimson, a testament to the brutal struggle taking place beneath the surface. It took the combined efforts of several wildlife officers, armed with specialized capture poles, to finally subdue Reef and drag him away from Julia. But by then, the damage was already done. Paramedics, their faces grim, pulled Julia's lifeless body from the pool. Her skin was ashen, her eyes vacant. The wounds inflicted by Reef were horrific, a gruesome tapestry of deep lacerations and mangled flesh. CPR was administered, adrenaline injected, but it was all in vain. Julia Banks was gone. The news of her death sent shockwaves through Clearwater Springs, a community that had long admired Julia's unwavering dedication to animals. Grief and disbelief mingled with a chilling sense of dread. The unthinkable had happened. A line crossed that could never be uncrossed. But the tragedy didn't end with Julia's death. Reef, the alligator who had once been her beloved companion, was now deemed a threat to public safety. The decision was swift and unavoidable. He was euthanized, a grim necessity to prevent further harm. The community mourned not only Julia's passing, but also the tragic end of Reef, a creature who had become a symbol of both hope and danger. The local news was saturated with stories about Julia Banks. News headlines screamed the horrible truth. Local hero dies after alligator attack. Beloved animal rescuer killed by pet alligator. Reef euthanized, a community in mourning. The town held a memorial service, a somber gathering of hundreds who came to pay their respects. Stories were shared, tears were shed, and questions were asked. How could this have happened? What went wrong? Could it have been prevented? In the aftermath of the tragedy, the focus shifted to the broader implications of exotic pet ownership. The dangers of keeping wild animals in captivity were brought into sharp relief. Experts warned of the inherent unpredictability of these creatures, the powerful instincts that can never be fully suppressed, no matter how much love and care they receive. Wildlife officials reiterated their warnings, emphasizing the importance of respecting the wild nature of animals. They urged people to remember that alligators, like all predators, are driven by primal instincts, that their behavior is governed by the laws of nature, not by human emotions. Julia's death became a stark reminder of the delicate balance between humans and wildlife, a cautionary tale about the dangers of blurring the lines between domestication and wildness. It sparked a renewed debate about the laws regulating exotic pet ownership, with many calling for stricter regulations and greater public awareness. The tragedy also raised questions about Julia's own judgment, her unwavering belief in her ability to tame the wild. Some criticized her for ignoring the warnings, for putting her own safety at risk. Others defended her, arguing that her love for animals was genuine and selfless, that she simply wanted to provide a safe haven for a creature in need. Regardless of where blame was assigned, one thing was clear: Julia Banks's death was a tragedy that could have been prevented. It was a consequence of a misguided belief in the power of human control over nature, a failure to recognize the inherent risks of keeping a wild animal in captivity. The story of Julia and Reef serves as a chilling reminder that wild animals are not pets, they are not toys, they are creatures with their own needs, their own instincts, their own dangers. And until we learn to respect those boundaries, tragedies like this will continue to happen. The legacy of Julia Banks is a complex one. She was a woman who loved animals, who dedicated her life to rescuing and caring for them. But her story also serves as a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of blurring the lines between human affection and untamed wildness. Her death was a tragic reminder that nature cannot be tamed, that the wild will always remain, even in the most domesticated of settings, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is to simply let wild animals be wild.